I'll try and make this as sharp and painless as possible so that we can all get to it. So the first two things, or the two most important things you do as a writer is, or that you do as a, is either you're writing a news story or you're writing a feature article. I'm talking about, when you write as a news reporter, not as a novelist or an editorial or opinion person. So if you're writing reports as a young reporter or as a reporter, the two things you're going to be writing most of the time are news reports and feature articles. And I think for me, usually I think features are the ones that I do the most. But I'm going to start with a few tips, on writing news reports, and then probably go on to features, and maybe I'll take a few Q and A's later. So the first thing you want to do is select a newsworthy story. Now, usually what happens is your editor might select a story for you and say, this thing is happening, go cover it. Or, especially if you're a sports writer, you might cover an event or do something and you see something that is worth covering. Now, when I say worth covering, you have to ask yourself, what's my audience? How do you want to approach that audience? What somebody in Lagos might find compelling to their audience might not be what somebody in Aba will find compelling to their audience. So you have to decide first of all how is this news worthy for the audience that you want to report. So your goal is to make sure you give a timely account, of a significant event or development that is both recent and interesting. So those three things are important for news stories. They must be timely, it must be recent, and it must be interesting. When I say timely, timely means that if it's because okay, let me start with recent. Recent means it happens not so long ago, maybe within like a day or two, And then timely means that you don't wait, something happens today, you don't wait until next week before you want to report it as news. As it happens, you're right, you're doing it immediately, So at worst, the next day it's out there, depending on what media you're covering for, whether if it's radio or TV, you want to get it out the same day, especially online, you want to get it out the same day. If it's newspaper print, then you want to make sure you get it out the next day. So it has to be timely, it has to be recent, it has to be interesting, and it has to be a significant development. The second thing you have to take note of is that think about your goals and objectives in writing the story. What do your readers want? That I mentioned it earlier. What do your readers want? What do they need to know about this subject? And how can you best tell them the story? So, like I said, what interests somebody in Lagos might not be what interests somebody in Aba or Port Harcourt or Kano. So, yeah, sometimes you get national news story that interests everybody, but usually you're writing for a local audience. Now, there are national and global stories that affect everyone, and they can be covered in different ways. But usually, you're writing for your particular audience, and that's why the news story that CNN might report is not the same story that AIT or channels might report. And those stories might not be the same story as Lagos State Television or Rivers State Television or Abia State Television might report. So every story, every reporter and every community has their own what they see as important. So you have to differentiate what is important to your audience. Sometimes that might be a national or global story, but usually it's a local story. So the third one, now find out who can provide you the most accurate information about the subject, and how do you contact that person, either that person or other sources. So I think just last week we had the coach of Rivers United who was kidnapped. So that happened, I think it was on the 14th. Now, usually when you're writing a story, you want to find out who is the best person who can give you the most accurate information on that story. And you ask, first of all, the people you might consider there might be who were those who were there with him, when it happened, and how can they help you tell the story of what took place there. Then you need an official source to give official confirmation, and then so that's where you look for someone like the police commissioner or the police PPRO, who can give you an official version of things. So by the time you put those two together, those who were there, eyewitness account and the police version, you have two great sources who can give you a very good, rounded, well-rounded idea of what happened. Now, do your homework. That's the fourth item on the pillar. You do your homework, do a research so that you have a basic understanding of the situation before you interview anyone about it. So what that means is, you want to get background, because you don't just go and write a news story and oh, this happened, this happened, this happened. You want to write a news story and say this happened, you know, this is what had happened before. This is the context of how and where it's happened, and this is what happens going forward. So that gives you the most accurate information. Sorry, that, your research, gives you a basic understanding of the situation. And then when there are any gaps that you need to know, that's where you interview people about it. And usually there are, I mean, nothing is new. Like we say, nothing is new under the sun. So some of these things have been written about already. So you can go online or do some research and check clips of stories that have been written already on the subject. That helps you to give you a more well-grounded approach to the story you're going to write. Number five is to prepare a list of questions you want to ask about the story. So those come from your research. When you've done all of that research and you feel you're ready to write, you're still going to have a few questions you want to ask. So you note them down. That's what the question you're going to ask your interviewee. Sixth up, now you arrange the needed. Now this is going to be very long, so I'm going to try and rush it so that I don't bore you guys. But they're also very important. Prepare a list of questions you want to ask about the story. What I've noticed, especially when people go to press conferences where they have a chance to ask questions, I find that, oh, my dog will not kill me. I find that um, people come to those places unprepared. So you see them, they start asking a question, and then they start rambling and rambling and rambling and rambling, and they start by trying to ask one question, end up asking something else. Before you go to a press conference or before you go to an interview, make sure every question you want to ask is written down. Don't wing it. I mean, I wing it a lot of the time, but that's because over time I've found that I can prepare something in my head and sort of, have an idea. But even when I do that, I tend to forget questions. So I've made it a habit now that I always write my questions out. Don't think that you're going to go there and just say, oh, how do you feel about this? How do you feel about that? What do you think? No, have specifics of what you want to ask and make sure that you go now. If something comes up during the course of your questioning and you want to ask a follow-up question, feel free to ask the follow-up question. And if the person in answering one question answer the question you have already on your list, then skip that question unless there's need for clarity. So now, the next thing you need to do is to arrange how to get your needed information. That means you schedule an interview with the person you want to talk to, or locate the person depending on where they are. That's why I said it might be a press conference, it might be you having to schedule an interview, maybe you giving them a call or anything. But once you have your questions ready, you can now plan to get that information. Number seven, when you've set up the interview on the date, make sure you're always there on time. If you have an interview with somebody, whether it's a phone interview or a face-to-face interview, make sure you're there before the person so you can get there, whether it's 5 or 10 minutes. I try to make it at least 10 minutes before the person gets there so that you can settle down, prepare, and you know be relaxed. You don't want to get in there rushing and then trying to arrange your stuff while the person is waiting for you. Even if you're going to meet them at their office, get there ahead of time. Stay in the waiting room, collect yourself, get everything ready, test your equipment, whether it's your recorder, your phone. Make sure your phone is on silent, everything is switched off, and you're ready to go once they ask you to start. So now when you're interviewing that source, because the one thing you don't want to do is take only one person's side of a story. So even as you're interviewing your source, ask the person to suggest other sources who might either corroborate or give additional information that might help you get a more well-rounded idea of what you're talking about. And feel free to tell the person at the end that if there's anything else I need, please, I would like to call you back. Because trust me, no matter how much you write your questions down and whatever you say, you're still going to need to do some follow-ups. And it's important to let the person know that I might call you in case I need anything. Most people, from my experience, are happy to oblige, unless maybe they are the ones who don't want you. You're doing a story that they don't like, then they are not happy for you to call them back. But in any case, if you have something you seem to clarify, you send them a message, say, look, I found this out. Can you give your side of the story? Even if they don't want to, they are going to be compelled to do so because they don't want a wrong idea of what you're writing to go out there. So they want to defend themselves. So always make sure you leave that space open to get back there and ask further or follow-up clarification questions. Now, when you've done that, so you've done everything now, you've decided on your story, you've done your research, you've decided on who to interview, you've interviewed the person. Now it's time for you to sit in yourself and do something. And the question you ask yourself now is, what is the story? What is the point? What do I want to tell these readers? Be sure that you must have a clear idea, in your mind before you start writing. You can jot it down. What I normally do sometimes is that sometimes even when I get all of this information, I find that I don't know where to start. So we call it mental. You have this mental writer's block. What I just do, I just start writing. So it doesn't matter what I write. It might be anything. I mean, as long as it's within the framework of that story, I just start writing and write. A lot of people say, clear your head, get up and clear your head and go and walk and forget about it. Well, it works for them, but it doesn't work for me. For me, I find that if I do that, I can't quite figure it. Sometimes I might go to sleep and it might come to me, but most times what I find that works better for me is just start writing. It doesn't matter what I sometimes I end up writing rubbish, but out of that rubbish that I'm writing, one line might be the difference, might be what kicks things into gear. I might start writing something and one sentence, and I decide, okay, this is where I'm going to start. So do what works for you. I don't know what might be your best. This is mine. Mine is just start writing and keep writing until something comes. For others, it might be get up, clear your head, forget about it, go and take a walk, drink some coffee, lie down, sleep, and then it'll happen. Others might have different things. I don't know, but you have to decide, have a clear idea of how you want to start and what you want to write. Um, Number 10, which is the part where you start writing, you make a written outline or plan of the story. How's the story going to start? What's the structure? Where am I going to start? What's going to be the middle? What's going to be the end? So when you do that outline, then you can now go on to number 11, which is writing the first draft of your plan. Now, the first draft is just a first draft. It's not the final thing. Usually I've found that because of my experience, I can write my first draft normally tends to be my last, apart from me making some minor corrections in typos and grammar and stuff. But I found that my first draft, is normally my final, my last one. But well, not final, but it's more or less what the almost like what I want to put out in the end. So, but write your first draft, finish it. Feel free to read it, look at it, make corrections, look for typos, look for grammatical errors, look for punctuation errors, and correct it when necessary. And if you have somebody who's above you, let them look at it and also give you a bit of correction. And that's number 12. You read through your first draft, you look for problems, you look for holes, you look for weak spots. I mean, I see a lot of those when I write my first draft. When you write, you see some mistakes, you see some weak sentences that sound like, oh God, even a 5-year-old would not write this. And then you revise it as necessary. If you have some extra words, and I do that a lot, if I have a 1,500 word story to write, and I just write. Sometimes I know that those words are superfluous. They're like extra, but I put them there so I can get 1,500, first. And then when I've got there and I come back and look at it, I'm like, okay, how do I tighten this? Because the way I am, because usually these days I'm more freelance than anything, and they give you a limit. You either have 750 or you write 1,500 words or 2,000 words. And my first plan is, okay, let me get to that 2,000 words as fast as possible first, so that I know that I've got there. So now by the time I write that, when I sit back and read it, and I discover that some of the things I wrote are just to fill in, are just padding, you know, just put like when people are wearing, when we now as men, when we carry belly, we pad all the belly. So I find that a lot of those words that I put there are paddings. So I on my second read around, I try and take out the extras, the ones that I know don't need it. So by the time you get to that the first reading, I think I find that okay, I can do this a little bit better. I can put information here, I can put information there, and I get to that where I want to get to. So that reading of that first draft is very important. Now, by the time you've done that, you now read your second draft. Read aloud if you like. I mean, I just read it. The first one I just skim through. The second one I take my time and look at it and make sure it's what it is. Look for problems in logic, in syntax, in spellings, in errors, all of that stuff. So when you find them, you correct them. Then you can now send it to somebody else for copy editing. They will check carefully. They will check for spelling, for grammar, for style problems. And usually, each organization, depending on who you write for, might have their own style guide. So if you're writing for that organization, you want to stick as much as possible to their style guide. I have a style guide. I normally use the AP style guide. It's universally acceptable, but sometimes some organizations take it and they make minor tweaks to it. So um, those things usually they might not be grammatical errors or spelling errors, but it might just be how the organization wants you to write. So if you're writing for a US media, for instance, their spellings are US spellings. You want to be sure you get that right. Different from when you're writing for, say, UK-based organizations, where the spelling is different from the US spellings and other things. So those are the little things that you look out for in that final draft. Finally, deliver your finished story. I think that should be number 15, if I'm not mistaken, on my notes. Yes, that's my number 15 in my notes. So when you've done all that, you can now send your story to your editor. Now, when you send it, they are more likely to do some more editing on it. But at least as an editor, I find that annoying when people write stories and then I have to almost rewrite it from the start. I like it when I look at a story and all I have to do is minor corrections and minor edits, not having to rewrite an entire article or feature altogether. So make sure that you are giving your editor as much of a finished product as possible for them to look at before you send it in. And most importantly, make sure you deliver on deadline. Unfortunately, I'm very bad at that, but I think maybe it's because I've got some kind of license to deliver on time. But it's very important that if you have a deadline of Thursday to deliver a story, make sure you deliver on or before Thursday. If you can deliver on Tuesday or Wednesday, fine. If you can deliver on Thursday morning, fine. But try not to ever go beyond um, Thursday, the day you're given as your deadline for submitting a story. The reason sometimes is because, I mean, the web has made things easier in the sense that we can put a story almost anytime. Back in the day, in the old print days when I used to be in print, there's still print if you're writing for print. You know that if a story is supposed to go for printing, it has to go to the press. And if you don't deliver on time, your story doesn't get in. And they might use that as an advert or something to cover it. And that's not good for you. So if you want your story to get in, you send it in on deadline. Make sure it goes whatever happens. So never ever lose your deadline. So this for me is my 15 steps to writing a good story. Quickly, I'm just going to give you a few notes on structure of a news story. I know that might be a bit of a deep dive, but I'll try not to dive into it too much. Maybe you guys, whenever you have questions, you can send them out. Now, um, when you're writing a news story, what you want to do is, grab and hook your reader straight away. It's different from writing a feature, and I'll talk a little bit about writing a feature maybe a bit later. But with a news story, you want to grab your reader straight and give them all the info. It's called the pyramid system, where you give all the most important thing at the top, all the most important information at the top, and then you go down to break it to expand on it. So when you're writing a news story, the first thing you want to do is make sure you have all of the relevant information straight up so that the people have it. So you cannot just wait. I mean, let's say, like I said, Stanley Guma was kidnapped, and you want to say, oh, on Friday, they this and that and that and that and that, on his way back from this and that and that and that and that, and while he was driving along this and so road, before you now get down. So maybe someone in the oh, Francis Guma, sorry, Stanley Guma was kidnapped. No, what you want to do is start right off the bat with the most important information. Rivers United coach Stanley Guma was kidnapped on and this by unknown gunmen on his way back from that. You stop it there, and then you now start building and saying, okay, how it actually happened, and so on and so forth, and then you now proceed from there. So from the get-go, when you're writing a news story, You want to get all of the most relevant information right out there at the top, straight up. No beating about the bush. When you do that, the second thing you go for is introduction. Now, the facts and the figures of that story. So we've already said in paragraph 1, Rivers United coach Stanley Eguma was kidnapped, on so day on the show back from so and so and so. Now, the next paragraph now becomes the facts and the figures that ground your story. Where was it coming from? What was it doing? How did it happen? How did they accost him? That sort of thing. That's where you now put in all the relevant information that people are going to want to know, because the first thing you've told them is that he was kidnapped. That's the what happened. The next thing is, where did it happen? You put it there. And how did it happen? It's also there. So now all the 5 W's have now been covered in those, between the lead and the introduction. You now move on to the third one. The third thing you want to do is get a quotation. Now, quotes are very, very, very important. You can't write a news story without quotes. One of my editors when I was younger used to tell me, quotes are everything. I see a lot of bad habits in reporting or writing in Nigeria, where people write a story and then he said, he said all the way down without a single quote. They're paraphrasing. Don't paraphrase. Let the people speak in their own words, because what you are as a reporter is a funnel, a pipe for information. So you're not the information. You're the pipeline that carries it. So if you have, say, water coming from here and the water needs to get here, now what you are the pipe letting that water move from here, point A to point B. So to make sure you can deliver properly, let the water do its job. Let the people speak what they want to speak. Don't try and paraphrase what they are saying. So that's why quotes are sacrosanct. They are life. They are everything about your news story. And then you get to the main body of the story. After the opening quotation, you now get to the main body. This is where you can now add the other things. You can add context. How many other people have been kidnapped? That road, how dangerous is that road? Why did he have to drive there? What security did he have? So at this point, you're putting in all of that relevant information that helps people build a picture of what actually happened, not only on that occasion, but on other occasions, so that they understand. They now get the same idea of what the news story is that you have. And then you can have a closing quotation, which sort of like, it might be a second quotation. At this time might be, this is where you now probably get someone like the police commissioner or somebody else to now, give you sort of like an idea of, so all those things you've been talking about, that information you've been talking about, you want to get somebody official or somebody in the know, an expert, to give you a quote, an opinion that rounds it up before you now go on to the final part, which is the closing, the conclusion. Now, sometimes that quote, that second quote, might act as a conclusion. Other times it might not, but you still have to round up your story. So that's how you write a newspaper article. I mean, this is just a broad overview. It's not getting into the nitty-gritty, but at least it gives you sort of like a guideline to doing that. Any questions?
We have, especially in this part of the world, a tendency to plagiarization or plagiarism. And at some point, it feels like it's not a big deal, but it should be a big deal. And you said we could, look at other people's work and see how it's done. But sometimes that sways your writing pattern to want to be like that of the person you think is doing a better job. How do you, as a writer, not more or less write in your own voice instead of trying to copy what you think looks or sounds better?
Well, I mean, you don't have to copy. First of all, the idea behind looking at what others have written, especially if you're writing a news article or a feature, is to give you a sense. It's research. It's to give you a sense of what has been written before, what information is there. Because sometimes you might be writing something and you think, oh, this is coming to you as something new, but maybe somebody else has written about that before. So you want to get a sense of what's already out there so that you don't repeat what somebody else has done. And you know, because it's a new story, you know, you're supposed to be providing new information, not recycling old information, because that's probably, again, what might lead to what might be plagiarism, because you think you're writing something new, but it's already been written, you know. So looking at what has been written before not only helps you get an understanding of where this new story is, but it also gives you more information. And you can even take some info from what somebody has written before, but make sure you provide a link, a hyperlink to, or you attribute it. This is where it came from. So plagiarism is when you go there and you take something that somebody else has written and then you try to pass it off as your own, even if it's 2 or 3 paragraphs. As long as it's not your original, you can't just go and copy it and put it there and say, oh, I wrote it. If you're going to do that, then make sure you put it in quotes like, okay, this came from here. This was what somebody else wrote. So it's always good to do research and see what's been there before. And again, sometimes, I mean, I learn from other writers. So if somebody has written something and I read from other writers, it also tends to give me an idea of, you know, I mean, if I enjoy a piece of writing, I want to be able to model my writing in that direction so that I can also have other people, if I can enjoy it, then let other people also enjoy my work.
Okay, now Adebayo asks, he says, I have a problem with titling articles. Is there any systematic way of titling a news story or a feature story?
Okay, first of all, when you have an idea of, because it all starts from what you want to cover, right? If you have, because when you start out by having an idea of what you want, a focus, a spine to the story. So you don't just go out and say, okay, this is that or this is that. For instance, we're talking about, say, Stanley Guma being kidnapped as an example, right? That right, it writes itself because you already have the stories, the stories in the head, in the title, in the headline already. You know, Rivers United coach Stanley Guma kidnapped. Those are the simplistic ones. Now, there are others that, especially in these days of SEO and stuff, where you're writing for the web, and you need to sort of, you know, find the best way to write a headline. Now, what you do is look at that particular area, look at the SEO, the trending words, and try to feature what you think will get you the most, I don't want to call it clicks, but the most eyeballs. Now, the way to do that is look at the things that generate interest. Money, people, and when I say people, I mean celebrities, blood, you know. So yeah, those are the three things that we learn when we're young: blood, money, and people. So I'm more likely to click on a story if it has Ronaldo than or Messi than if it has, say, Omero, for instance, right? If I see a story with Ronaldo or Messi and one with Omero, I'm more likely to click on the one with Ronaldo. So that gives you an idea of how celebrity does to bring a story to life. The same thing with money. If I see a story that says 1 billion naira stolen, you know, or 1 billion naira paid out to a lottery winner, and I see one that says, what, somebody is holding a party or somebody is doing something, that 1 billion is more attractive to me than whatever else I see there. It's a similar thing with blood, wars and blood. Unfortunately, people like bad news. So if something concerns war or fighting or blood, then it attracts people. So what you try and do is look at those things first from a very high level. Okay, if I'm writing a story, what is it about this that makes it compelling? So is it that there's a celebrity there? Is it that there's money involved? Is it bad news, or is it war or blood or something? Now, on a different level, you now look and think, okay, um, what are the trending issues of the day? And then you try and incorporate those trending issues into that title or headline. And so if today, for instance, like we're watching the Euros now, for those of us in sports, France and Hungary are playing. So what happens in that instance is that by the time this game is over, you're writing an article about the game, then that's the euros are what's the in thing. Now you want to make sure that you incorporate the euros into the article you're writing, or it could be the Olympic trials taking place in Nigeria at this point in time that you're covering. You make sure you get that in your title. Those are just the basics of how to get it in there.
All right. Thank you so much for giving us your time on this series, Colin. It's been a pleasure having you, and thank you so much for your time.